today we got back in the show Amos, who is the CEO and co-founder of Swan AI. And he's come back for another round of insights on how to build an AI native company. Now, he's using AI for everything, and he's delivering on his promise that he's made to the market of being a $10 million per employee company. We're gonna check in on him and see if he's still alive. You know, he works crazy hours. There's only 3 of them, and they use agents for everything to sell agents, which is mind-blowing. I can't wait for him to tell us how he's doing, how's he holding up, what's latest in agents, what are people using agents for, what's the latest in go-to-market technology using agents, because he's selling that to other go-to-market teams, and he's leading the pack in terms of what it turns out to be an AI-led company. So I'm so excited to see him. I'm excited to hear back from him. Let's get paid. Amos, so good to see you, man. You are always the realest conversation we had, and we're going to drop some knowledge, some opinions, lightly held, strongly held, both ways. So good to see you again, man.
Wow, man! Every time I go on this pod, my blood pressure goes up. I get pumped, I get excited because I don't know what will happen, what I'm gonna say, but let's see how it's gonna unfold,
It-
man.
It's going to be real. It's going to be real. All right. So let's start where we left off. So you're still building the smallest, largest company in the planet. How's that going? 10 million per
Uh,
employee. Let's go.
It's going crazy. So, for those of you who don't know, who's just joining, this episode for the first time, me and Manny. So, at Swan, we're building the first autonomous business. We're on a mission to get to $10 million ARR per employee. This is going to be a sub 10 people organization that operates at an enterprise scale, but at a startup speed. We launched Swan 5 months ago, closing in on almost 200 customers, almost $1 million in ARR. So it's been super crazy until now. And, it's like a small POC. It seems like it is possible, Manny. It might be possible.
It's like the 6 minute mile. Somebody's going to break that record. And the moment you do, you will show the path to everybody on how to do it and the fact that it's physically possible.
I love that analogy because in athletics it's not a game of chance, right? It's not you can't be lucky and win in athletics, right? You got to be persistent, and you got to architect for it, right? So if you look at the best athletes of the world, they architected their success. They worked on specific training program. They built their body in a
Yeah.
specific way to actually become that specific organism that could move at that speed or jump
Right.
at that height, right? So if you look at the same thing as a company, you need to architect your organization if you want to build like that, if you want to scale like that, right? So at Swan, from day one, we took that decision that we're going to scale with intelligence, not with headcount, but not just because it's cool, because we believe that if you do architect for that, and if you build your company around that kind of like main concept, then you're not only more efficient, your execution speed is kind of like 10x better, right? So it's not about just operating at a better margin. It's just learning faster. It's shipping faster. It's giving better support, better success. It's about iterating faster. So all the things that are crucial for a startup to succeed, and it's a story of architecture. That's how I see it, actually. And I have a ton to say about how we're building this business different than traditional companies.
So, dude, what you're saying is music to everyone's ears. I don't know any founder that wants to, raise a ton of money and get a ton of people and but have a bunch of headaches. So, what are the principles that are, non-negotiable at Swan that are different from the SaaS principles? You're a multi-time entrepreneur. So, what are you doing differently? What should everybody else do differently to
Yeah.
build a small company that is massively profitable?
So, first of all, like there's this main principle, that you got to follow, which is the hardest, and it's a constraint, basically. And the constraint is that whenever you interact with a scaling challenge, then you can't throw bodies at the problem. You need to throw intelligence at the
Mm.
problem. And as startup founders, that we followed the growth at all costs unicorn playbook. We've been there, where you raise a shit ton of money before you get to product market fit, then you get to 30 people before you get to the first $1 million, and then you get to 100 people before you get to the $10 million, etc. What you basically get accustomed to is that, okay, I have a lot of support tickets. Why don't we hire a support manager to hire a support reps to
Jesus.
manage a support team, right? That's the first step you do.
So you sounded
And
like a VC right there. Like I felt like I was in a meeting right now. I was looking for the door right away.
and and so at Swan, when we hit like the first, scaling challenge, which was actually also support, what we did is that we said, okay, we're not going to hire a support team. What we're going to build is, an AI agent that will help, first of all, the founders, alleviate some of the support pressure. And we started kind of like discovering it, layer after layer. And eventually, accidentally almost, we discovered kind of like this AI agent that is super customized to what Swan needs in terms of, the people within the organization, the support requirements, that can handle, over 70% of these tickets autonomously. And the crazy thing of all, Manny, is that what we realized is that in an autonomous business, there isn't any support functions at the company. Okay.
Ooh.
And if you ask why, is because support is basically the process of answering questions based on a knowledge base, right? If it is, an issue with the platform, then that goes to R&D, right? R&D
Right.
needs to handle support, right? So at Swan, if there's an issue, right, it goes to the product team, right? They handle the support, the product team. That's like one person, right? But it goes there. If it's a commercial issue, maybe, I want to downgrade, I want to upgrade, I don't get the terms, I don't know why, I thought I signed for something else. This is a commercial thing. Goes to, the people that are in charge of revenue. You can call it success in big companies, but when you're three people, you don't have success. So you have someone that's in charge of revenue, and that's what they care about. And so you don't have support. AI handles all of the questions about the system, and when it's a commercial thing, it goes to revenue. When it's a technical issue, it goes to product.
How do you get to that clarity of thinking? Like, is that's not normal. You know that, right?
And so I'll tell you what I feel like. In for me, you get to kind of like have something that is clear in terms of like very long distance. Okay, you need
Yeah.
to have that north star for yourself. What is it? Why are you building towards? What are you building in the long distance? And then you just iterate on it in very small steps, right? So
Mm.
if everything, for me at the company, everything that we do is, an iteration towards that goal eventually, and everything is an experiment. And so if you treat everything as an experiment, you always have a goal, you're always trying to accomplish something, and you can always understand if you're succeeding or failing, if you're kind of like validating or refuting. And if you try to, always work at that process, then, there's much more clarity to everything that you do, right? Because that's, you can
Yeah.
define success. You understand if that's good, that's bad, if it's forward, if it's backward, etc.
Got it. Okay. So principle one is there is no such thing as support. Is everything is autonomous and either goes to resolution by looking up something in the knowledge base, or it goes to product because it's a product issue, or it goes to revenue because it's a revenue issue. Brilliant. What else?
Yes, but the constraint is actually you can throw bodies at a scaling
There you
challenge.
go.
The
All right. So
support is
that's
an
the
example.
but nobody's at the scaling challenge. Principle number one: everybody get a big notepad with a big pen because it's our big thoughts. No,
Exactly.
nobody's at the scaling challenge. Good. What's number two?
Number two. So we have only three functions. So we talked about support, right? So let's talk about, instead of just giving support as an example, let's understand like the principle of how we look at the functions within an autonomous business. Okay. So first of all, an autonomous business don't have 10 different roles under the go-to-market umbrella. Okay. It has only one. Okay. And I'll explain why. So we call it revenue creator. Okay. A revenue creator is in charge of growing sticky revenue. It's the, combining of net new ARR and NRR. It is in charge of both of them to grow them together. Okay. What we don't have is this misalignment of incentives between, demand gen that is responsible for MQLs, and then SDRs who is in charge of meetings booked, and then AEs who are, incentivized to meet quota, and then CS to push for NR, and support, of course, right? Everything. So you just get revenue creator. That's function number one, and that's what you're trying to scale sticky revenue. Then you have another function which is product creator. Product creator actually, you look at the work of developers, they're getting away from the code because there's that intermediate of AI between them and the code all the time. You have Cursor, you have Devin, you have Buzz, you have all these types of AI agents that are kind of like intermediating between the developers and their code base. And so what developers are turning to be are more like product people because they need to understand more, high level architecture and more to be closer to the product itself, etc. So we look at the CTO, what we have is more like a product creator. And then the third function, Manny, which is super interesting, is the agent creator. How can you scale
Mm.
an autonomous business? What you need to have is a function that sits between these two functions and is responsible to help them grow and scale with intelligence, not with headcount. And that is the
Mm.
agent creator. And we have Ido, who's the third co-founder, who is building, for example, for myself, an army of AI agents so I can scale sticky revenue with intelligence, not with headcount. I don't have the time to build these agents. I need to work 24/7, talking to people like you. So other people would hear, the story about Swan and eventually buy the product, right? I don't have the time
Right.
to build these agents.
So what is he? Tell me more about the agent creator. That's a new role. Sounds made up. So like, what is it? What is it doing?
So um, it it looks at these two functions, product creators and revenue creators. You can think of it if you want to think from traditional perspective. So the go to market organization and the R&D organization. Okay, it looks at both of these functions, and what they basically are obsessing with is identifying bottlenecks that they have,
Mm.
mapping these processes that they're kind of like operating within and trying to reimagine these processes if they had, AI agents that are, working alongside them. So what an agent creator does that is very different than I would say 99% of AI implementations today is that an agent creator doesn't look at a process to automate. It looks at
Mm.
a human being at a center to amplify, to empower. And so Ido, my co-founder, always looks at me when he's thinking about which agents to build. He looks at me and and asking himself, how can we turn Amos into 100x go to market machine? He's not talking about how can we personalize emails at scale. That's not interesting. And we know where that leads eventually, right? To these spam cannons. And so that's not what we're doing. And if you take it one step further, then our entire AI agent machine that we build is actually designed around my LinkedIn game because I have a very powerful LinkedIn game. And so we
Yep.
build a machine that takes it, from, writing the content to watching the engagement to seeing the connection requests to seeing people visiting our website to everything. All that funnel is kind of like have AI agents built around them because it is designed around a human being at the center, which is me.
Right. Are you then using that and turning it around and selling it to your customers? Is that sort of like the cycle of innovation here? Like you automate yourself so that your customers can see how you do it, and then you can sell. You're selling Amos to the world. Is that?
Yeah, so we're not selling Amos to the world, not that specifically. That will be too valuable to sell, man. If we would sell that, yeah, we would lose our business. I'm just kidding. But um, like our story is that we believe that in 5 years the amount of autonomous businesses out there will be like hundreds of thousands of autonomous businesses, and we're basically what we're trying to say is we're building our product. It's by autonomous business for autonomous businesses, and so we're discovering how this should look like for other businesses, and then kind of like we're going to build it for them. But it's not like these are disparate agents. We believe that our role in the world, what we're trying to bring, is that this operating system for go to market, and specifically for small to medium businesses that are trying to operate in more of an autonomous way. And if they want to work like that, then Swan is the lighthouse to how to get there basically. And the product that we're building is the boat that would actually take you there.
That's a great. I love that analogy. All right, so let's capture the learning, everybody, with a big notepad, big pen, big thought. So now we have the business is literally three pieces: the revenue makers, or the revenue creators, sorry, the product creators, and the agent creators. That's simple. What are you not doing by simplifying your business that way? What's falling off the side that you wish you were doing, but you can't because you only have three people?
So the bottlenecks are always with the two sides. So, with product and revenue, right? Each one of them. But first of all, with revenue, it's all about, relationships. And, we're not trying, this is not like a prosumer business or consumer business, like Lovable or all these, platforms that are billing for like as an individual
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah, you have to sell it. You have to sell it.
We're selling to businesses, and and selling is about relationships, no matter like the size of the business. It's about relationships, right? And what we're trying to prove here, that this model can scale relationships, right? And we can scale intimacy, not remove it. Like, we see the AI agents as a bridge towards our customers, not like a wall between us, right? But that's a lot of heavy words, but in practice it's hard, right? It's hard because we're three people, and our attention is scarce. And although we have these AI agents that are, we're trying to focus our resources on just the most important touch points that we have, but it is super hard. So that's one thing. And of course, the other side is, software development velocity, has a connection to, the amount of developers that you have. So that constraint that we put, it makes it harder to, develop a product. And we have, almost 200 customers. We need to support them with features, etc. And you need to keep up, with the market. So that's not easy. So what I would say that, the challenge is, the software development velocity and scaling relationships.
So, do you ever like go to bed and be like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just hire five more people. That this is just incredibly hard. It's 11 p.m. I'm still working. I gotta wake up at 5 just to like get my work done. Like, when are you gonna like? Have you thought about like breaking this whole concept? Right.
Yeah. So, of course, all the time, and you got to have doubts, especially when your back is breaking under the pressure.
Right.
So definitely, but um, you know, the autonomous business
He's-
model is not about three people scaling to infinitely, and that's not what we're trying to prove here. It's not about just we're not like a messiah that is trying to put that all that burden on his back and be so miserable just to prove a point. It's not about that. We're building a business eventually, and what we're trying to show is that when you think differently on the business, you can discover this new architecture, right? So we want to be eventually, like a sub 10 people organization. We are planning on, growing the team at some part. If we will hire one more person right now, it will be just one. We will think of who is that one person who is worth $10 million in ARR per employee for us, right? So we will kind of like expand the team over time, but we will always keep this architecture of an autonomous business, and we will always try, to be extremely kind of like lean and efficient, and to scale with intelligence, not with head.
So the obvious question is where so that one individual, where would they go out of the three departments that you have? Where would they go?
So it depends on the talent. That's the thing, man. So
That's a good answer.
what we see it is like, how we see it is that because we have the financial freedom to actually compensate this person, like the big tech is doing, because we're not hiring an army of employees here. So the search for another person on the team will be driven by the person, not the role, basically. And if we will see, like, the most talented person on the revenue side, then maybe we'll add them to that function. But if we will encounter someone who is obsessing over agents, and that's what they want to spend their passion, and we think that that is a super talented person, then maybe we'll add them to the agent creator team, or maybe to the product. So every function, if you just bring that 100x person to the team, we'll know that that will amplify the
Yeah.
speed of development of the company.
I was gonna get a third. So is there a third principle that you live by that is unbreakable that we can communicate to our listeners here?
Yes, I have more principles, Manny. We
No,
can
just
go on
give me
forever,
a
but
third one. I know
I'll
you
give
do.
you a
I know
third
you
one.
do.
I give
I
you
know
a
you do.
third
But
one.
we can just give the whole thing away in one sitting. We gotta pace this out. So what is number three?
Okay, so number three, it might seem kind of like obvious, but it's not very much obvious, I would say. Okay, so it's called feedback loops. Okay, and you know a startup is built on feedback loops, right? That's pretty much that's obvious. And I feel like, that's, when you're building something new, so and you don't know exactly what you're building because you have that long-term vision, but the market eventually determines, how would that be built eventually. So you're optimizing for feedback loops, right? And I feel like, a good startup, builds their entire company so that they can, optimize, get as much feedback loops they can at a shortest amount of time. But where it gets interesting is that, when you work with AI at the core of the company, you need to design for feedback loops between you and the AI. You're collaborating with the AI itself. So if you build an agent that doesn't have any ability for feedback loops, then what you're creating is a tech debt, basically. So
Right.
every AI agent that we actually deploy within the company has this capability of, of feedback loops that I could say, yeah, you know what? But when you reach out to that specific person, that's how we actually say it. Or, we don't work with universities. Or, you know what? If you're talking to a user in that context of pricing, actually escalate to the founder because we don't want you to handle support about pricing. This is like our discussion, right? So you have to design for feedback loops, not only when you're trying to validate your business for the market, but when you're trying to validate this notion of scaling with intelligence, not headcount.
That's amazing. All right. So the third one, big pad, big pen, feedback loops. You need feedback loops everywhere in the organization to make sure you
Exactly.
scale with a headcount.
Exactly.
So let's switch it up a little bit. So, there are so many advantages of creating this autonomous organization. First of all, is the fact that you're small. Second of all, is that you scale revenue well past headcount. So that gives you this sense of independence, right? So how does that change? How do you approach fundraising, for instance, as an autonomous organization?
Yeah. So, you know, I've been approached by like over 50
That
VCs in
I
the
am your
last
secretary here. I'm filtering intro requests to Amos every other day. So like
I
you
appreciate
owe
it,
me
Manny.
3 hours or 4 hours of your day.
Maybe we will convert it to some equity, Manny. We can talk about it later.
There you go. Now we're talking.
So, the fact that we're being approached by these VCs, it's not just to brag. I'm not saying it just to say that we're cool. What I'm trying to prove a point here is that, VCs are starting to understand that the venture capital model is changing. And, the fact that startups used to require a lot of capital to succeed. And what we actually seen is super interesting. If you look at kind of like the evolution of startups of the past 25 years. Okay. So if you look 25 years back, actually starting a business wasn't that capital heavy, right?
Right.
You just got, if Airbnb, I remember like got like a check of, $150,000 at the beginning of like a, $1.5 million valuation. That was like, something like the first check that they got. I don't hold me back on the numbers, but something like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they managed to build Airbnb with, $150,000 at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, when we started startups, it was super, capital light. But what happened is that over time, the playbook of building a startup, stayed stale. It didn't, update it. And
For like
what
20
happened
years.
for like, yeah, 20, I would say maybe like to be kind of like very positive, to maybe 15 years,
All
just to
right,
be kind
15
of like
years.
super, super accurate. We had Eric Rice,
Yeah,
sharing
lean
the
startup. Yeah, yeah,
MVP,
yeah.
the
Yeah,
lean
yeah.
startup. That was like 2009, something like that, I think, right? So like 16 years. And over that course of these 16 years, the way of building startups didn't really evolve. But what happened is that they required more capital because, it was just more expensive to build a startup because there weren't any innovation in how you build a startup. And that was very good for VCs because that was the evolution they wanted. You just need more capital. You just need more of our, what we have or more of our resources. And so
Right.
VCs became, the gatekeepers of the startup industry and they set out all the rules. But what's happening right now is that, intelligence is the most important resource to scale a startup, not capital.
Um,
And when you look at intelligence, so VCs don't control that resource as well as they control funding. And so they understand that, the power dynamics are changing. And so maybe you don't need a growth investor that puts, 20, 30, $40 million in your company, because if you reach that scale already and you build your company based on intelligence more than capital or headcount, then you might not need them anymore, right? So
Yeah.
when we look
Yeah.
at an autonomous business, to your question, Manny, we believe that this is actually, we're rewriting the playbook of how you scale a business, how you start a business, and how you scale it. And it requires a completely different funding, prospect for these VCs. And the VCs that will want to invest in an autonomous business are VCs that are super adaptable. They understand that the change is happening to their market, that not a lot of
No, yeah.
VCs were going to survive this change. And if
Yeah.
they would not adapt, they will find themselves in debt to their LPs.
All right, that's a big deal. I mean, you just drop a big bomb here because the job of the VC is to deploy capital, right? And if you're not consuming as much capital as it needed to deploy the entire wad, then you're not playing their game. So, what kind of VCs are you talking about, and what's going to happen to like the entire VC industry?
Yeah. So my prediction, and I'm more of an expert of scaling, businesses that sell a product, not capital. So that's a little bit out of my game here because I'm, not an investor. I'm on the other side. I'm, the customer of that investor
But
basically.
you've been in the game long enough, brother. Come on,
But I've
just
I've been
just
I've
let
been
it
in the
rip.
game. I feel like um, what we're going to see is this separation or like divergence of private, a lot of VCs that will go to become private equity companies. Okay,
Mm,
because like if you look at like the middle of the funnel, so we have like IPO, then we have like private equity, then we have like growth stage, maybe like mid growth stage VCs, and then you have like early stage VCs, just to have like a
yeah,
rough
yeah,
segmentation. So if you look
yeah.
at that chunk of like growth, mid and growth VCs that are pouring, 10 to $100 million checks into companies, they will lose their place in the world. And what will
Um,
happen will either go up to become like a more of a private equity to acquire companies and play like, a different game of, just, adding different value to the company. And it's a different type of service that they're offering basically. And on the other side, they will go super early. They will
mm,
go super early to fund these autonomous businesses that they might need help at the beginning to push the business to build the right architecture to scale with intelligence, not headcount. And they will play like the early stage, pre-seed seed funding, and that's it. And these startups won't need more capital, maybe even there. And so
interesting.
it will kind of like push these mid-stage VCs towards these two different directions.
You know what's really funny about what you said is that the beneficiary of that power dynamic is the employee of the autonomous startup, right? Because now you have fewer people accruing all the value that the startup has accumulated, right? Like over time.
I
So
love that.
tell me, so like, given that this is hot on the press right now, so like, what happens when a company raises a ton of money with a big expectation, right? And then just the founders piece out, right? And
Mhm.
now the rest are holding the bag, of a big valuation, revenue that is challenged. This is big money game, right? Like, so explain to me how that works, and then how do you avoid that as an autonomous company?
I knew, Manny, that my blood pressure is gonna go up, in the conversation. That was obvious, right? So, yeah, you hit a nerve.
We're gonna have
You
to
hit a
walk it
nerve.
off. We're gonna have to
Yeah,
walk
definitely.
it.
Oof. I need to drink some, glass of water. Just
Yeah,
give me a
there you
second.
go.
So, look, I'll start actually. I'll start from a different direction before we talk about like the fiasco that is happening right now with AI startups and acquisitions, and there's like a big story in the press right now between Google and OpenAI and Microsoft about a specific company. We won't say names, but when you look at actually at an autonomous business, I want to start there, okay, with the contrast, and then I want to get to what's happening on that specific startup. So when you look at an autonomous business, I get a lot of people that telling me, "What? But what about the job market? You're eliminating, yeah, jobs from the market. This is like a super small organization. What about all the people that these companies hire?" And what I tell them is that in the future there will be less concentration of employees in specific companies that accrue all the value, and there will be much more autonomous businesses that will actually distribute the wealth among these employees, among other people. So it's actually better for the employees, Manny. Like you started saying, that was an amazing segue and super important one, because the leaner the team, And the less, equity you give to external investors, then it means that the distribution of wealth actually goes more to the people that weren't, receiving a lot of the value that they created, for these companies. And actually, the vision of the autonomous business world is that we're going to have so many autonomous businesses, small businesses that are accruing a lot of value and distributing it, among their employees. So if you have 10 people or you have 100 people, that's so different than Apple that, is accruing so much value, but how much they're distributing among their, thousands and tens of thousands of employees, right?
Right.
And so when you look at, the startup that was in the news right now, then, this is really, from my perspective, it's a sad story what happened. And just to,
Mm.
maybe to share kind of like, with the audience, if you're not aware of kind of like what happened, specifically, is that there was kind of like a very hot AI startup that, entered a bidding war between kind of like the top, big tech companies. And eventually, to close the deal, they kind of like manipulated the system and did kind of like a backdoor acquisition so that, founders and investors will get billions of dollars, and employees will be left with nothing, actually nothing. And so the employees were left with $0 from that acquisition. And then there was an acqui-hire that came later on from a different company that tried to compensate them for what's ever left from the company. And that is a very sad story of, of a like maybe 300-person organization that these employees built the majority of the value of this company, and they were left with none. And this is a very sad story about the unicorn playbook and what the autonomous business model is trying to fix in the world.
That's amazing. So is this the wake up call that everybody needs as we're building, startups, is to say, look, we have to, this is gonna be small, it's gonna be powerful, and everyone is gonna get paid. You see what I mean?
Yes,
Don't
it is.
scale out.
It is a wake up call, and I think, um, the North Star for an autonomous business is ARR per employee. And if you look at the traditional playbook, the North Star is valuation, right?
Right.
And why the North Star is valuation? It's because of, the incentives, basically, right? And the investors, they set the rules. So they say, what, we're going to optimize for valuation. But when valuation is the North Star, we can get into these hype cycles and spend so much money on the wrong things, and just, focus on, inflating valuation instead of, value creation. And
Yeah.
I feel like, if we will go through this bubble and all of these companies will just focus on valuation, then we will see more stories like we saw in the news of, these AI acquisitions, and, investors and startups just want to cash in, investors and founders just want to cash in early,
Right.
instead of, when you look at ARR per employee, which is, it's about value creation to the world.
That's amazing. You know what? I really like that you said that because you're small and you have, a little bit of funding, you can pay people the same as they would be paid at a, large company, and you have upside. That shit is unnatural, right? Like the trade-off used to be like you take a dip in a dip in salary because you have all this upside. So, there's a whole generation of people that are about to get screwed based on that premise. And and there's a whole generation of people who was about to generate real value and pay everyone fairly and, generate wealth for a small set of individuals based on the autonomous startup. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Even more, I would say, Manny, I believe that over the next 5 years, enterprises are going to lose
Ooh.
repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. They're losing on all fronts. Why? But one, from what we just talked about, the redistribution of wealth and the ability of small startups to attract, talent is growing, right? Because scale, because headcount is not something that gives you an advantage anymore, right? And capital is not something that gives you a lot of advantage anymore. It's how you use intelligence. That's
Yeah.
what gives you an advantage, right? And if you look at it from a distribution of wealth perspective, then you can attract talent. But if you actually look at it from an efficiency gains, from productivity gains perspective, then you see that enterprises, because they have this bloated organization, that what they thought that this is an advantage now becomes a disadvantage. What they're playing is the headcount game. They're saying, okay, let's try to reduce the cost that we have on our support centers by 20%. If we do that, amazing, we won, right? And so they will get incremental gains from the AI revolution because they're playing that headcount efficiency. Let's remove 20% here, let's remove 30% here, and that's it. But when you look at an SMB, when you look at the SMB that wants to become an autonomous business, it won't help them to reduce, from 6 SDRs to 4 SDRs. That won't move the needle at all, right? They will be
Mhm.
forced to reinvent their SDR function so that they can turn 6 SDRs to operate like 60, right?
Right.
And so SMBs are poised, they're positioned to actually leverage the AI revolution 100x better than enterprises. And so what we're going to see over the next 5 years is that enterprises will stop look like enterprise because they're becoming smaller and smaller. That's what they're trying to do, right? And
Right, right, right.
SMBs are not getting bigger that much. They're just getting bigger in revenues and in ARR per employee. So they're
Interesting.
leveraging intelligence in a great way, and enterprises are trying to become SMBs just because they're bloated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's really interesting reframing that if the holding if the bottleneck is the application of intelligence in the organization, then that's a completely different game than headcount or access to capital or even distribution. Because even distribution is getting a little easier right now in my mind. Like even though I get a lot of shit about that, but LinkedIn is open to everybody who puts in, a little elbow grease and time. You know what I'm saying? And like everyone is open to hear your message, for instance, Amos, about like how do you build an autonomous startup? Like Satya and the Microsoft team has been talking about that for a while, and then you're taking that and roll with it. So it's their idea, your execution.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, saying that distribution is getting easier, that's an interesting perspective, Manny. Tell me, like, I would like to hear why are you thinking like that?
Well, it's interesting because um, you went from zero to famous Amos in like what, a year?
You
You see,
coined it right
you see
now.
what I
I
did
love.
there?
Wow, wow, amazing.
In like a year, didn't you? Or like maybe two
Uh,
years.
no, it took me 5 months.
All right, you destroyed my point and even made it better, right? So like you got distribution because you had a point of view, right? And you had a platform by which you can evangelize your point of view, and you have a ready audience that for whom that point of view resonated. So tell me, how is that not distribution at scale?
No, 100%. My, and if we're kind of like, diverging a bit to talk about distribution because it's also very, topic of passion of mine because I love talking about distribution. And, David Zacks is like a famous investor, an all in podcast. Um, he coined like this amazing, super simple law. It has like a very bad name to it, but it's very simple. And in its essence, it calls it the power law of distribution arbitrage. Okay,
Mm,
and it's very simple in its meaning. It says that the power of your marketing playbook, of your distribution playbook, basically,
mhm.
is will get lower as much as people get adopted it, right, copy it, right. So the
Yep.
more people actually use the same tactic, then the less effective it is, basically. And I feel like over the course of time, attention was always kind of like constant in a way that you're always fighting for attention.
Right,
What
right, right.
happened over time is that maybe LinkedIn came, that's an increase in attention because you get more attention from the buyer. Instagram came, that's more attention from the buyer. So in that perspective, Manny, like you said, we're just getting more and more attention from the buyer, right? What you need to understand is that you can't play by the rules if you're trying to play the distribution game, because if you're playing by the rules and you're doing what everyone else is doing, that means you're choosing the least effective method to distribute your solution. And so that's like was a core principle for Swan. When we thought of how we want to go to market, it was always about be different, don't play by the rules, and try to reinvent the playbook.
100%, but I also think that that has been true for a while. Like it's not a new concept. Like we've been busy and our attention has been grabbed and our attention span continues to go down over time. And what you have done, exceptionally well is take a point of view that is, provocative, that is even orthogonal to what everyone is doing, and just like keep beating that drum, right? Like all you need is 1,000 fans, or maybe even 100 fans, and
Hmm.
you can work with that. And it's not that hard to find 100 fans and then 1,000 fans in LinkedIn, and then the virality kicks in, right? Like then they start preaching your message, and all of a sudden you are the messiah for the autonomous, organization, and boom,
Yeah,
and I'm
100%.
sure somebody else can come up with a different point of view. And I think that what we are starved is for difference. It's for real content, substantial content that really challenge our beliefs, and it propels us to the next level. And that never goes out of style.
I would say just add another thing to what we're starving for is authenticity, Manny, which is something that you're doing a great job at. And I feel like, that's one of your superpowers is to kind of be authentic, be super present at the moment, but still, sharing this point of view. And I would say for someone that's also trying to build their own point of view and their own presence of the world, keeping this authenticity is not easy. And there's a lot of, places that you want to exchange it for quick wins. But, eventually that's what we're looking for. It's that authenticity.
Something that you said that is super important, and actually, I just heard this podcast, No Priors, and they had the CEO of Rippling on that podcast, and he made a very important point that you're making here too, which is it is hard to go from scaling with people to then automation, because the processes that you have to build to scale with people do not lend themselves to full agentic workflows. You have to rethink, from first principles to actually put agents on it. So if you already scale with people, you are in a world of hurt because you have to like undo the process and undo the people to then layer agents. Whereas if you scale with agents, you can continuously improve, change, throw away, bytecode the next generation, and you have now infinite scalability process wise. What do you say to that?
Yeah. So I would say that we can see like a good analogy to that maybe would be to look at organizations with product led growth DNA to them and organizations that have very like enterprise sales led DNA to them, right? And I've seen companies trying to start with one, build their entire DNA of the company, and then move to the other, right?
Yeah.
So and you see how hard it is, and eventually what the it's never super successful, but if they have make it at least successful is because they build like a completely separate organization that is
Right.
built from the ground up on that DNA. So if you're a product led growth company, you want to sell to enterprise, then you start building from scratch your
Right.
enterprise motion, right? You need to bring the people, you need to bring and build kind of like the organization from bottom up, and same goes to the other point of view. And so that's kind of like leads me to the point of why enterprises are in such a big trouble, right?
Right.
Because their only way to become more autonomous and to actually leverage intelligence in a better way is to rebuild their organization from scratch. What does it mean for like a 10-person organization? How can they even do it? And when you're building an autonomous business from day one, what you get basically is an unfair advantage. And what people don't understand today, and it will be super obvious in 5 more years, is that is a moat on itself. So the way that you're architecting your business is a moat, because what happens is that when you build based on traditional scaling principles, then what happens is that you start deaccelerating as you grow. You become more bloated, more cumbersome, more processes, more approvals, more bureaucracies. You're just getting slower and slower and slower, and your ability to leverage intelligence just diminishes. And if you understand that we're just at the beginning of the intelligence revolution, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what this technology can do. And so if you build for an autonomous business from day one, you actually accelerating as you scale, you're getting faster and better. And the more that intelligence will improve, the more that AI technology will improve, you're just widening the gap.
What's really interesting about what you said is that as you scale, you get smarter, right? As you scale, you know more, right? When you start, you don't know shit, and you're trying to figure, try to get product market fit, and like how customers will use it. But like after you get some scale, you actually get smarter, and the bottleneck becomes these human processes that then get ossified, and now you can move faster, right? Whereas if intelligence is the only bottleneck, then you got architect intelligence to actually move faster as you grow, which is counterintuitive, right? Like most people slow down as you grow, but you can actually get faster as you grow if you're architected right.
Exactly. So there's this concept that's called return on management. I love that concept, and
Well, I love that.
so pissed with myself that I don't remember like the book and the person. But return on management, it's kind of like a good way to look at how you scale your organization from like from an org chart, bureaucracies, processes, approval perspective, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what happens in an enterprise, or like, the traditional way of scaling, is that return on management diminishes the more you scale, because you just put more layers that are just in charge of the processes that you put in place because you have more layers, right? So these
Yeah.
processes were never supposed to be there. They're just there because you have more headcount, more coordination, more people to manage, basically. And so an
So do you
autonomous, yeah,
this is really important because there's a lot of people that are in the marketplace right now that you may or not hire that are looking for career growth. And career growth for them means becoming a manager, right? In your organization of 10 people, there's not going to be that much management going on. So it's just productivity. Just a straight up output. So are you not attracting those people? Do you not care? Like, or what does that do
I
to your
love it.
hiring strategy?
You're so sharp, Manny. That's such an important observation. And so an autonomous business is a flat organization. Okay, it will always be a flat organization. That's why you have like the maximum return on management always, right? That's when
Right.
you have that flat
Because you only have one
organization.
manager.
Exactly. But what these people actually do manage, they manage their kind of like, department. You can think of it. They have like all these AI agents that they're orchestrating around them. So, the talent that we're looking for, what we three of us, that's like what we are, and the talent that we will be looking for is, executives that enjoy dipping their hands in the mud. So people who want to create something with their own hands, but they've been there. They know what does it mean to scale an organization. They understand, how to, if you're focused on a metric and you want to move that metric, and you have a workforce and resources to actually move that metric towards something, then these are skills that are required in an autonomous organization. You're just not applying them in traditional way to traditional headcount. You're applying them to intelligence resources. But you have a goal, you have a metric, you need to drive your resources towards that goal, and you have the autonomy to get there. So we require all of these executive skills that you have, but you need to be like a super hands-on person to enjoy, getting dirty.
Interesting. So there must be a return on agent management concept that you're gonna have to come up with to just fill in the gaps, as you're building
I
the
have
plan.
something, Manny, and that will be for another episode that we're going to talk about, because, as you know, I'm always thinking about these things. So how to look at agents from measurement perspective and impact perspective. That's a big subject within the company, and
Oh shit.
I
Okay.
leave it to the audience to wait for our next chat.
That's right. That's right. You're always cooking, and so glad we got to visit the kitchen, and you can't wait to do it again, man. That was awesome. This was the most like information density podcast that I don't think that we have ever done. Every time I talk to you, we walk away both exhausted and excited because we cover it all. You know what I mean? We got
Definitely.
6 months summarized in 35 minutes. Brother, good to
Manny,
see you.
I feel like I need to go to sleep after this session, but but like lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling for like 30 minutes, because I can't fall asleep because I'm too pumped with adrenaline. So that's like the situation that I'm in right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So good to see you, man. Appreciate you as always. And we'll see you in about 3 months.
Let's do it.